Well, hello and good evening. My name is Lispy, and I am a nerd, and I came here to talk to you about nerdy things. So recently I've been thinking a lot about how software is developed. And it seems to me that it's best developed in a collaborative way when a lot of people collaborate together. And before we begin, I would like to get a little bit of a feeling of my audience. So maybe we can do a little bit of show of hands. I would like to know how many of you are closer? Okay. How many of you are software developers? Oh, geez, everyone. Okay, and keep it up. And how many of you want to be a software developer? You have two. If you have two hands, you can raise them. Okay, you're living the dream. That's awesome. I see that vast majority, which is great, because that's who my talk is addressed to. Okay, and just to see, is there any like a designer or a product manager? Oh yeah, okay, great, great. Any entrepreneurs or startup founders? Oh yes, great, congratulations. You're in a world of pain. And any teachers or coaches or anyone? One, great, okay. Yeah, of course, counts, totally counts. Is there anyone who didn't raise their hand yet and would like to introduce themselves? Okay. Great, let's move on. So we have a little bit of diverse audience, but mostly software developers. So today I would like to talk to you about choices and combinations, which is a kind of tool for thinking. I'm going to show you some Rust code. Well, they made me, but the code is just for illustration. It's like very simplistic. I'm just beginning to learn Rust, so I'm not going to impress you with anything. And once again, it's like just for illustration, right? The talk is about thinking framework, maybe a little bit of design framework, but well, we'll see how it goes. So let's go back to the idea of collaboration. So software development involves a lot of different roles, kinds of people, right? There are users, and I believe we should always start and end with users. And there are designers, managers, various other roles. And of course, there are software developers. And in this context, I believe software developers are like translators. Our role is to translate the knowledge about business or system or whatever into working useful software. And if we stay with this metaphor, a good translator needs to be knowledgeable about what they are doing, right? About their domain. They need to be sort of an expert. And I believe the same applies to software developer. So software developers need to understand what and why and how they are doing. And at my company, Software Garden, we put a lot of work into making developers into domain experts in their field. So I use this term business domain, so maybe it's good if I explain a little bit what I mean by that. So many of you maybe have something like that in mind, like some enterprise-y, little bit ridiculous setting. But what I really mean by this is like a pretty broad definition. So for me, business is any group of people that do something in an organized way. And it doesn't have to be commercial, doesn't have to be formal, doesn't have to be for profit. For example, of course it can be a company that has products or services, but it can also be like a government agency or a non-profit, or it can be a free software project done by like in open fashion, right? So anytime people come together to do some work, for this duration of this talk, let's call it a business, right? And group of people to collaborate, they need to understand each other, and they need to know what they are doing, how they are doing it, and why they are doing it, right? And this knowledge, this is what I will call business domain, right? Knowledge about how, what, and most maybe importantly, why we are doing what we are doing. And I think it's best if this knowledge is transparent and shared among as many people as possible, and not only people who are involved in a business, but also people affected by the business, right? Everyone should at least have opportunity to understand what's going on and why. And in a healthy organization, I think this knowledge also constantly evolves. And well, at Fiberplane, they probably know it because they are building new products, so they constantly discover new things about it. I don't know for sure, but I think it's a pretty safe bet. So I think this knowledge should evolve in a meaningful and empowering debate. And that means that there's a shared responsibility in an organization to enable this kind of debate, but also personal responsibility of everyone involved to understand what's going on and to be able to express their thoughts about it. So, to enable this, today I want to talk about choices and combinations. This is just one of many tools that we can use to understand and to communicate about business domain. This one, I believe, is like really powerful. It's applicable to a variety of real-life situations. It also translates very well into code. And it's especially nice for recognizing and dealing with invalid states. An invalid state is a situation that doesn't make sense in a given domain, right? And I know it all sounds a little bit abstract, so maybe it's best to explain it using an example. So let's suppose that we are building some kind of calendaring system, right? A calendar is contains events, right? And these are just like simple example. Obviously, there's more to events and calendars than this, but again, it's just illustration. So if you look at these examples, we can see that event has a start and an end, and then some sort of description, right? And the start and end can be, we see, it can be either a date and time, like hour and minute, where it starts and when it ends. For example, now we are having fun here at this meetup. It starts at 6:30, it will end at 9. At least that's the plan. But if I'm going to watch Simpsons non-stop for 3 days, then I don't care about time, right? I just care about these 3 days. Right, so start and end can be either a date or a date time. So let's see how we can implement it in Rust. And again, like, please don't be offended. I know these are like, the details are terrible and I would never want to implement it like this, but it's just for simplicity, okay? So here's one way. A calendar has events. An event is a vector of event. Well, for non-developers or people not super familiar, vector is basically like a list, right? It's just ordered list of things, right? So it's an ordered list of events. So then what is an event, right? An event has a start, an end, and description. Description is a string. String is a text, right? It's, again, like a weird word for just text. Okay, but it has time and time. It's start time and end time. So now the question is, what is the start time and end time? Sorry, what is time? Right? So time is either a date or a date time. Date has year, month, day. Like, this is the terrible part I was telling you about, but right? And date time has year, month, day, hour, and minute. Right? And already we see a glimpse of choices and combinations, because event is a combination of start, end, and description, right? 3 things combined together, whereas time is either a date or a date time, so this is a choice between 2 values, right? And then, of course, date is a combination of these three numbers, and date time is again combination of three numbers, 5 numbers. Okay, so these were types. Now let's see how we can add things to our calendar. So we have some kind of schedule method, and we add event. We give description, start, and end. Pretty straightforward. Here we are adding another one. This one has also hour and minute, so it's a date time. And here we are adding another one. So after giving the stock, I will have to decompress. First I will sleep until afternoon, and then until Friday I'm going to watch Simpsons. Okay, does it work? Well, not really. So here we have a pretty cryptic error. We can see that I tried to run this thing with cargo run, then it was compiling, but ran into an error, and it says non-exhaustive patterns. And then it's like super cryptic, with like half of the things like punctuation here. And it says not covered, right? Here we can see like a little bit more, the red text I think is more visible. So we see that there are two pairs, right? We have something and something, and this first something in parentheses has date, date time, and then date time, date. And so they are not covered. Okay, that's cool, good to know. So, and of course it gives me the coordinates where the error happens. So it says main errors, line 87. So let's look what's there. Okay, this is line 87 and following. And okay, we say match, and again it's like pretty cryptic, I would say, like end, self, start, end, self, end, and then like date, and there's some dots, and like, right? Okay? I don't know, not pretty. But we can ask the computer to tell us, like, to fill the code that is missing. It says that something's not covered, so let's just do it. Okay, now I have this, so there's date and date time, and date time and date. Only the computer tells me to do. So it's for me. I am the one to do this thing, like as a developer. Okay, so what I should do? Like what to do? How can I feel this? Like deal with this thing? So what does it even make sense? Like can the event start at the day and end at the time? Like it's kind of I don't know, is it a whole day event? Is it a part? Like, I think it just doesn't make sense. Okay, so let's try to fix it. And this is one way, this is kind of how I would approach it. Let's say that a calendar has events, but events is a vector of calendar item, right? So this is first change. It's not event anymore, this is now calendar item. And now calendar item is a choice. It's either a regular event or whole day event. The regular event has date, time, and date time, right? And whole day event has date and date. And then this date, time, and date, they are kind of the same as before, only now they are standalone types. They are no longer combined into an enum, now they are completely separate things. And with this, we cannot mix date and date time, right? Either it's a pair of dates or a pair of date times, which are only valid states in our domain. Let's see how would adding these items look. So now we say schedule, and look, now we have to make choice. You see, now we have to make a choice. Is it a whole day event, and then I give 2 days? Or is it a regular event? Well, and now I face the choice. Am I going to watch Simpsons just for some hours, or for whole days? Obviously, I chose days, right? And now look at this place where there used to be an error, right? This is the logic that is responsible for displaying this thing. We have some not very technical people. I don't know if you agree with me, but and if you can make sense of it, but I think like now it's much more expressive, right? There are no parentheses, no pairs, no, it's okay. Either it's a whole day event or it's a regular event. If it's a whole day event, I just print a whole day event. If it's a regular, it's regular, right? So the logic becomes much simpler. and more maintainable. Does it work? Well, yes, it does. Now it beautifully prints my calendar. So to take a bird's eye view, right, to gloss even more on the details, this is what was before. Before, event was a combination of time and description. So start time, end time, description, and time was either a date or a date time. Right? This was before. And because there was time and time, here a combination and here a choice, that means like 2 times 2, so we had 4 possible patterns to cover. But 2 of them made no sense. So now we have calendar item that is either a regular event or a holiday event. So here we have choice between 2 things. Regular event is a daytime and daytime description, and holiday is day and day description. So now we have only 2 main patterns, right? Either a holiday or a regular event. So as we can see, using Rust types, we can remodel our domain into something that makes more sense. Right? This was just a very simple example of a problem, but hopefully it illustrates how you can apply this thinking of choices and combinations into the real life problems that you're facing. And choices in Rust can be represented as enums, whereas combinations can be represented as structs. Or tuples, of course, but kind of similar in this sense. And maybe more theoretically oriented people in the audience recognize that choices are sum types. They correspond to sum types from type theory, and structs or combinations, they are product types. Only, I think this, especially if you are talking with businessy types, I think sum types and product types may kind of alienate them, but choices, combinations, I think it's more natural language. So to recap this talk, today I presented choices and combinations as a framework for thinking about business domain. And choices, they correspond to sum types, and in Rust we represent them as enums. Combinations, they correspond to product types, and in Rust they are represented as structs. And most important, this is really the most important point, is that as a developer, I really encourage you to think clearly about domain, which basically boils down to 3 questions. What we are doing, how we are doing it, and why we are doing it. Right? If you find this kind of thing interesting, then please get in touch with me at Software Garden, which is my company of friends. We are doing workshops, paid and free, for developers, designers, and managers, other types, that help them share their knowledge and collaborate better. And if we still have any time, I'll be happy to take your questions or hear your polite thoughts.
All right, so one of the things I was wondering about is you talked about how product types and sum types can be used, and that's of course one part of the Rust type system. But we also have lifetimes and borrows. And I know one application where these can be used to model behavior, which is of course the mutex, which has a mutex guard, which limits the availability of the containing type to where it's valid, where it's safe to access it. Have you thought about any ways to use lifetimes and borrowing to encode business modeling into Rust?
Yeah, that was the question I was afraid of. You have you really have talent to ask difficult questions. No, the question is great. So actually, okay. So first of all, I'm just learning Rust, and my experience right now is that Rust is an ampersand-driven development. So I write code the way. Here's how it works. I write code the way I think it should be. Then the compiler gives me errors, and then I randomly insert parentheses until it works. Ampersand until it works. And I'm getting really good at this. Like on average, on third trial, I get it to compile. So I'm afraid I'm just not equipped to answer the question. But my observation is compared to functional languages. I think Rust has, there's a little bit of mixing of very technical side, especially in type system, with this business domain. And I think this may make it a little more difficult to communicate with other stakeholders, not very technically oriented stakeholders, because like even in type definitions, you have this like, borrowing and lifetimes. So yeah, I'm really curious, and I would like to collaborate with some Rust expert and maybe explore this. Like, maybe we can use it to some advantage, because as I say, I'm just at the beginning of my journey. So yeah, maybe there's a good way to do it.
It's just an idea, but maybe it could be useful to guarantee database entry validity. I know I abuse a part of Rust sometimes, where I get something from a database, and then I also take a borrow of that database in some kind of guard-like way to ensure that the database isn't changed while I'm using that value. I recognize that bit from your talk. That might be useful, so that's why I asked the question.
Kind of like an atomic operations, like
yeah,
like
sort
that?
of enforcing some kind of atomicity on the database level, though. What I'm doing is horrible abusing of the database. So don't do that.
Okay. Well, now you have 2 talks scheduled. Anyone else? Some easy question, please. Like,
what's your background?
I'm a lawyer by education, but I'm better now.
So what you described was constructive logic, right? Have you digged deeper into what are the limitations, like law of excluded middle? Like you can't model certain stuff using this approach.
Yeah, of course, you can't model everything. Yeah, this is just like, it's just scratching the surface. Yeah. There's much more to, especially like type-driven design. It has a lot more tools and also a lot more advantages. The reason to use type-driven design, the advantages that we have there, is mostly for me, it's that the compiler becomes like a tool for thinking. The compiler helps us think about business domain. It can actually detect or at least hint at contradictions in our understanding of the business domain. So from this very technical tool just to transform code into executable, it becomes a tool to think about the problems.
Have you looked into theorem provers, like TLA plus?
Yeah, if you're an extremist. Yeah, the question.
I mean, if you are interested in modeling stuff, you can take a look into the tools that are specially designed for this, and you can express more things into them, like dynamic behaviors of your system, not just its static construction and so on.
Yeah, definitely. I would be careful not to lose part of the contributors, like collaborators in the meantime, right? Because you always have to strike a balance between like expressivity and simplicity. Like I really think that communication is the most important tool to solve problems. So if we are using tools or languages or frameworks that are very specialized, maybe very expert level, we may have difficulty engaging other stakeholders in our activity, right?
If you have a good enough type system, you can embed all sorts of logic in the types themselves. Come again? No. At some point you have to give up. Your compiler will not stop, because then the other stuff from them. But you were saying about linear, sort of using borrow checkers. There was this debate. Yeah, lifetime checking. You're switching types is a bit like, was this discussion at Curry on some years ago on how Haskell was switching to using linear types to prove transactionality, and that other kind of logic that talks about a logic that changes over time, so transactions, vis-a-vis as an approach chosen by the Haskell community versus the Rust approach, which is using the borrow checker, which they argued is maybe more low level, more technical, but equivalent, serves the same purpose for the use case of Rust.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, now you're proposing like one way to deal with the problem, like, and is there any like trends that you noticed in Rust community, or like how people often like are they also follow the same logic, or you are looking at them doing this other way and then you're thinking like, yeah, this is how would I solve it, and how I would like the community to kind of solve it. Like, yeah, my background is very basic. I'm a system engineer to begin with, and I just recently picked up Rust, and I'm like just looking at things, and yeah, so I just wanted to. So far, I haven't seen a community or the trends or anything like that's my background.
Yeah, I will defer to the wisdom of the crowd because I don't have enough exposure in Rust to know what the trends might be. From my personal experience, I'm coming from a small language called Elm, which is, I would describe it like a simplified Haskell. It's a functional programming language with very expressive type system. And one of the enablers, well, one of the reasons I decided to learn Rust, and now I'm in the process of learning, is this discovery of Rust type system. And so it was kind of a realization for me that maybe what makes language really nice to work with is not so much is it imperative or functional, but yeah, a sound and nice type system. So I don't know what the trends might be, but I definitely see that this kind of approach to solving problems is very much possible in Haskell, because we have this type checking compiler that gives pretty good messages if something is wrong. You have exhaustiveness check, and a lot of goodies from functional languages like option types, results or eaters. Yeah, there's a lot of there. I feel like people in Rust community don't talk so much about this theoretical side of things, which I think is good actually, because it makes it more accessible for newcomers. So there's not much talking about monads and functors and stuff like this, but the stuff is there. So I think it's a nice way. Oof, am I off the hook now? Well, thank you very much.